Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host. And for this episode, I have the pleasure of being joined by Phoebe Garnsworthy, all the way now from Portugal, although she's Australian. Thank you, Phoebe, so much for being here in your really early morning. And as all of our guests do, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Brian. So my name is Phoebe. I am a spiritual author and meditation teacher.
Beautiful. And tell me a little bit about how you got into this and how was this something that you were into when you were a kid or when you grew up?
Yeah, definitely. So spirituality is something that I've been into since I was a child. Definitely. I have always been fascinated with other worlds and different realities. And I collected crystals since I was very, very young. I've even got all the crystals with me. So I understood the magic of that. And it's funny, in my writing, I actually tap into a lot of past life energy too, I think. I tap into a lot of spiritual philosophy and wisdom from different past lives that I've had. And now, the more I write, I have flashbacks of also being a child. I write nonfiction and fiction, but in my fictional titles, I pull in a lot of pagan witchcraft, and I have flashbacks of being a child and doing initiation witchcraft. When you're a child, you don't have the filters of what you're doing, and you don't really understand, what's reality and what's not. So it's fascinating. As I've gotten older, I can see, oh, I did that, and that connects to this spiritual practice now, or things like that. So yeah, no, it's definitely something that's been with me since I was very little. And then as you get older, you meet certain people and you understand the tools that help really, create your own spiritual understanding of the world and perception.
Yes, definitely. And because I mean, there's this difference a lot of times between a lot of us, that some people were born and we, as you were just saying, we have that connection since we are kids, but then we start losing it, and then perhaps we get into it. Did that happen to you? Were those teenage years something that got you a little bit away from this, or were you always kind of continuing with that connection?
That's a really good question. I actually held tight to my beliefs through teenage years, through childhood, through teenage years, because I think teenage, you're still kind of a bit unsure of who you are. So a part of me was really pulled into that understanding while trying to go through adolescence. And then it was more in my 20s that you get distracted with different vibrations, and you get distracted over false identities or things. You feel like you've figured yourself out, but you've got the whole world and you're learning how to survive. And I think that that's the big key of why we forget our spirituality, why we forget that we have a soul, because we're pushed into this kind of rat race of 9 to 5, and we're then distracted with what we need, what we're being told that we need. And we have to really navigate through that and come back to our soul and really remind ourselves that you're a spiritual being. Enjoy this life, enjoy this experience.
Definitely. And I'm curious, was your environment and your family and close friends enabling this, or was this something that you were the weird one?
That's good. You know what? I've been lucky. I've always at least had one other weirdo with me. They've come in different forms. my family, being in Australia, you're always outdoors and you're connected to nature. And I find nature for me is my biggest teacher and it's my biggest healer. So I've always had that support in terms with my family. And then I've managed to luckily have like a close friend who also was very, very spiritual. And we'd talk about, you know, all of the supernatural things that would happen to us. And then as growing up, even in the 20s, when you're being distracted, there'd always be a spiritual leader that would come into your pathway. And when I say spiritual leader, I don't necessarily mean a guru or someone that is praised as one, but it could be a stranger, or it could just be someone that mentions something to you that clicks you back into, oh yeah, you're right. Like I remember who I am. And it's those kind of little messages. And I think that they're messages that come from spirit that keep coming throughout you. But it is difficult. And I think it is very difficult for people to find their crowd and to find their people that support them to help them be. But now with, tools like your podcast and other online resources, we're able to connect with people more. That's been one of the positive advantages of technology, luckily. But yes, exactly. I mean, when you and I were young, I'm sure it was a little bit more difficult to find, or we'd be looked at the weird ones.
Yeah, and I love, that there is a sense of, at least for me, a sense of embracing being the weird one, and being the one that was doing things differently. And of course, like as any, like especially teenage years, like and everything, I was as well a typical kid, at least for Argentina. But I did have this side just because of my parents that were bringing all of these different teachings and philosophies home. I had this weird side that, like, for me, it wasn't weird at all. It was just my way of connecting and my spiritual connection. But based on other people's perspectives, it was weird. And I'm always interested in this just because there is a sense that sometimes spirituality is too woo-woo and too out there. And like, to be fair, there's things that seem that way. But when you say, for example, before, like you have nature as one of the places to connect, and for me, it's one of the greatest teachers that there is. There's nothing really woo-woo about it. It's just literally like, go out and feel it.
Exactly. No, definitely. And nature as well, like that's the most ancient form of energy healing. That's what we can see like dated in, even though there's not as much information that we can gather from our ancient transcripts, but all of it relates around nature. So, and exactly like you said, you don't have to be spiritual to go outside and know that you're going to feel better if you go for a swim in the ocean. You're going to feel better about yourself if you go out in, a walk to the rainforest. But I think it's important when we do these things that people are more aware of what's going on, to tap into that energy, knowing that your soul is going to be nurtured and nourished being out in these places, being out in nature. But if we can just bring forth that understanding of what's going on, we're able to go a little bit deeper, and we're able to really, use it more to our advantage. And I think it'd be nice if people are more aware of that too.
Definitely, yes. And I think that as I talk usually, going back to ancient ways that are more connected with nature, more connected with the seasons, with the cycles of nature, will enable us to create some changes, even within this modern society, if we're able to tap into that. And I'm interested, Phoebe, in how did you get into writing?
That's a good one. Writing is something I've done since I was really little. So that's something that I have always, I've always used writing as my form of healing. Writing has been my form of self-reflection, self-awareness, self-acceptance. And I kept a journal since I was old enough to write. I think I kept a journal since I was 8 or 9 years old, like could write properly. And I still do it today. So to this very day. And then I I came back home one year because I've been traveling around a lot, and I saw all of my journals in a big box at home. And it was just like this kind of light bulb moment of I should be sharing, I should be writing and sharing this as a career. Like I enjoy doing it. Why have I never done it before? Because I wasn't doing writing as a career. And then everything kind of fit into place and it just flowed really easy for me. And so that was over 6 years now. I've been writing, and it's what I'm meant to be doing. There's no other option for me. But it's hard. It was hard to have that realization. It wasn't until I actually saw it all. And it's funny because people, when they're going through that career change or looking for what it is that they want to give to the world, I like to think of it as your medicine. It's how you're healing the world. It's your medicine for the world. And I think one of the things is thinking what it was that you did when you were a child, going back to that source of you before your perception was altered, before you were scared of being who you could be. And that's what I was when I was a child. That's what I loved doing. I didn't care about the world, looking at me any differently. This is what I needed to do. This was how my soul communicated with me. So it's something that's really woven throughout my life, which is beautiful.
And I'm curious about, you mentioned you do both fictional and non-fictional writings. One is like, how come you do both? And like, is that something that was consciously a choice or something that just came through? And as well, tell me a little bit more about your process of how do you actually write it.
Okay, so the writing, I do fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. Actually, the fiction came first. When I was little, I loved fairy tales and I loved fantasy, and that was kind of, I told you how about when I was younger, I kind of did like witches initiation. So for me, that was just really eclectic, wild imagination, and I couldn't not tie that into my writing because and my fiction fantasy is more almost for me because I really need that kind of, imagination. And when I thought about writing my very first book, I knew that I wanted to pull in a lot of spiritual philosophy and wisdom. But when I wrote it, I wanted to write to my younger self. When I was quite young, I was confronted with death at like 9 years old, and I started to have the questions of what is reality, and I kind of went through that kind of early, almost like a spiritual awakening, just a change of perception, a change of consciousness at that very young age. And I didn't really have anyone to turn to. I didn't know who I could talk to about it. So it's almost like I wrote that first book for that little girl, and to help her understand spiritual philosophy, I needed to do it in an imaginative way, in an interesting way. So I adapted that into the first book, which is my Lost Nowhere series. I've got two books in that, and I'm about to do a third. And it's about understanding the world in terms of spirituality. So in this world, it's a magical world, and there's 7 lands, and each of those 7 lands represents our different energy chakras. So as you're traveling through, you learn what each energy chakra is and, the positive and negatives of it. And I think that that's just a really good starting point. So a lot of things happen, but that's how it starts with the fiction. But from the fiction, then I got more callings to do non-fiction. I had developed a readership and following, and they needed a lot more immediate questions and answers. And I actually attracted a lot of adults. I had written this intentionally for the younger generation, but it was almost like a fairy tale book for adults. I got a very much older audience. So that then was a natural progression, the non-fiction, and just helping with spiritual tools and philosophies and techniques that help you live your best life, help you move through that noise and navigate and really connect back with our soul so that we can live in alignment with who we really are. And then the poetry is actually real extracts from my journal entries growing up. So it's interesting, like the journaling, when you're younger, it starts off as today this is what happened. And, that's kind of how you write it. But because I had been writing it for so long, as I got into my 20s, that didn't excite me. And instead I wrote very stream of consciousness style fashion of how I feel, what's going on, what this means. And even though it would be going through a deep darkness, because I also battled with depression in my 20s. And as I'm going through that, I would write that down, but I would channel the voice of my soul and I would give myself positive inspiration at the end. So it would, I would explore something dark, but then at the end I found that light, and it gave me the motivation to keep going. So so the poetry books are really a very, very personal piece of my heart. But I love them all very equally. I don't have a favorite. I'm always writing on all three, actually. I'm always working on each 3 different books at a time, because it's all these different sides of me.
So interesting. And I just want to touch on briefly, if you don't mind, because I do think that this is an important topic about depression, about how even with people that are into spirituality, there's a lot of people that actually experience depression or anxiety or a lot of different range of emotions and experiences. Would you be able to share, if you don't mind, what was that experience like, and how did you deal with it? I assume that partly was the writing, as you just said, but
Yes.
like, were you doing some other practices, or how were you able to navigate that?
Definitely. So depression is something that I have I've been confronted with throughout my whole life. And I think it's actually something that I'll always get. Like, it's not, but I'm not scared of it. You've got to, I understand the signs. I understand how to prevent it. I understand what to do if I'm feeling it. And there's very different forms of depression, and I'm not speaking as a medical advice or anything, but for me with it, I find it's important to sit through it and to enter that darkness. It's not something to be scared of. I think it's important for us to hold darkness and light under the same umbrella, and that's how we become whole. It's these 2 parts together. The more we oppress, the more we suppress that side of ourselves, the louder it's going to become, and the more we'll actually drown. So it's important for us to enter it bravely, to sit with it, to feel with it. And it comes back to me with the spiritual understanding that everything is energy. So it's just a different form of energy. And we have the power to be an alchemist of energy. We have to learn how to transform that into lightness. So I use different spiritual tools to help that come about. Journaling, definitely, number 1. Number 2, I was meditation. And that's also why I became a meditation teacher. I really find meditation is my number 1 tool. Along with journaling, the 2 together are hand in hand. I can't pinpoint. But that just really helps me stay level-headed. It helps me clear out that energy. And then I also do a lot of rituals, and that's also what I write and I share within my book. So even though a lot of my books aren't labeled as, depressive self-help, they are to help people with mental health and with anxiety and kind of overcoming those feelings. So it's forms of rituals where I connect with the different universal energies around me, and I connect with my soul and just really find out what's going on, what's wrong in my life. For me, with depression, it comes when there's something wrong in my life, and what can I do to change it? What am I not doing enough? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to invite in? And at the same time, sometimes it could be nothing. It could just be, okay, you've just got to feel this. There's something for you to find. And I always come out of it. I always find something beautiful. And I always find that actually I have the most awakening understanding about myself and the world from doing it. So it's a gift in a strange way.
Yeah, well, I do think that, every single experience that we have is an experience where we can learn something from, just as with anyone that comes along our path. They are, as you mentioned before, everyone can be a teacher. Anyone is a teacher. I do think that every experience shows us something, I always, at least for me, I always see my experience in terms of, because you said something there that I think that it's important, is noticing where something is not resonating and what is there for me to let go of, or to actually get back into alignment, and to be able to bring myself back to a place of balance. And that for me is one of the main practices, is how all the time, how can I bring myself to be balanced in every aspect of my life, both internally, externally, with relationships, because that is one of the best things that I can do for myself, because that's the best way that I can show up in the world for others, really. And I'm really interested in knowing, when you do this type of work, do you encounter a lot of people that then they are coming to you because that's what they need, because they are lost, and they are trying to find something, or who are the people that you end up bringing in?
Yes, I think it's a mixture of that. I have people at all different stages of their life. Some people can be a lot more lost than others, and others are they've had that glimpse of what it is to be in alignment, but they've forgotten. And and it comes down to routine. I think it's all about that. The more we're able to bring in a morning routine, an evening routine, and kind of have that moment of resetting our time and energy with ourselves, it's just having that moment to ourselves. So it's and it's like what you said before about how we know all the answers within, and it's just a moment of reminding ourselves of that truth. So I definitely agree. I attract people that are looking for those answers, and they're just you just need a little bit of a remembrance of who you are, and kind of take back those layers of who you think, unlearning what it is that we've been told. But they definitely, it comes in different waves.
Definitely. And this is one of the things why for me I resonate so much with the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, because there's a lot of this work about unlearning and taking off all of the veils that are preventing me from seeing the truth, that I'm whole, that I am, in the Buddhist language, like I'm a Buddha, I'm enlightened, yet I need to remember that, and I need to unlearn and uncover and remember. And that's one of the things that for me, there is so much power in knowing that I have the power. And this is for every single person. And I think that this is so important for everyone to understand, that each of us, we have that within. And yes, we might need an external person or situation to remind us of that. But it's a very interesting thing in terms of how our education system works, that we are learning, or that someone is teaching us, whereas this is this deep uncovering and being able to find the tools to actually reconnect and to be able to unearth all of this out. And I do know that, at least for me and so many people, as you were saying before, meditation is such an amazing practice. And for so many, writing, journaling, the experience is so important.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're two most key, because like you said, with the teaching of unlearning, when we journal, that's when we're unraveling all of these preconceived ideas, or these limiting beliefs, or all of these teachings that we've been taught throughout our life, which haven't actually been correct, and it's all about pulling them down. And I like to think, again, it's the spiritual understanding that everything's energy. So when we're putting them down into our journal, we're releasing that energy. We're letting it go. We're putting it in front of us, and we've got an opportunity to analyze it, to self-reflect and be like, does this serve me? no, that belief doesn't serve me. Okay, let's let it go. And it's energy. So we're able to, we're physically and spiritually able to release it from us. So it's important. And then with the meditation, it's the same, where we're just clearing that pathway, where we're unlearning. Well, I think in meditation, we're already whole, we're in that position, but it's that process of getting to that bliss point of being able to, you know, really connect, and then everything's peace and nothing matters.
and I'm curious to get your perspective on, and if you would be able to share a little bit more around rituals, because I know my my practice, I have a lot of rituals, and I do incorporate them every day in my life. But I do know that for a lot of people externally, sometimes when they see the rituals, it's kind of like a little bit weird, especially when, you know, it involves specific things like crystals or whatever, like burning sage. Like, how would you explain the benefit of ritual, and what are rituals for people that perhaps are not or have never been really around it?
So I'll start with the first one, with explaining rituals. I mean, rituals were once like a ceremonial term back in the day, but now, as we've modernized, I guess, our concept and understanding of spirituality, rituals can be something like you wake up in the morning and you put on a piece of jewelry that someone that you love gave you. And that's a form of ritual. You know, that's you connecting with the energy of what someone else is giving you. You're feeling love. So I think that it's important that I think that a lot of people are already incorporating little rituals and they don't understand it. And it's just taking it one step further to really, to connect with that. So if that is something that you're doing and you're just wanting to just start out, when you put that piece of jewelry on, you give thanks and you give gratitude, and you're tapping into that energy frequency. With my rituals, I like to, and I write about this all in my books as well, I like to call upon different energies. So I connect with universal energies, and I connect with energies of fire, water, air, and earth. And I set up a sacred space and have something tangible that represents each of those pieces. And then I also connect with spirit, and spirit is representative of myself. It represents spirit in everything. It can connect with ancestors as well. So for me, I use my ritual as a form of connecting with different energies and to harness those energies. And depending on what it is that I want to do the ritual for, if I just want to connect with my soul, then I just sit with that and I move through that space. If I'm wanting to manifest, or if I'm wanting to let go of something, then I will touch on a specific piece of that universal energy. So, for example, if I'm feeling a bit out of alignment, if I'm having difficulty making decisions, if I don't have a clear understanding of my day, for me, that tells me I'm ungrounded. That tells me that my soul is floating above my body. I need to call that energy back in. And the best universal energy tool that we need for that is earth energy. So if I can't get outside, I connect with the earth energy that I have in my home, and that's when I use crystals. That's when I use a plant or something that for me symbolically represents it, because it also comes back to the question of what is reality. We're just energy, and we're perceiving it in different forms. We're in a room right now, but that room doesn't exist. We can move through that because everything's energy. So even if I can't physically get outside and connect with earth energy to ground myself, I've got it within me right now. So it's that's how I look at my ritual space. Is it's a form of something tangible and symbolic that represents my spiritual side, that connects with my soul, and then I use it in different forms. but like, I think that the most important part of my ritual space and of setting up a sacred altar for me is just to connect with my soul, and it's to honor my soul, and it's to, you know, get those answers, come back to who we really are, and know that we've got the ability to create the life that we want because we have the power within us.
Beautiful. Yeah, and you know, one of the things that for me, and this is why I wanted to ask you this, is because a lot of people don't realize that they are already doing rituals every single day. Like perhaps the ritual is waking up and looking at your phone and checking online, like checking your emails or social media, but like the day is comprised of rituals for most people. We are our behavior is we follow the same patterns usually, which means that we are doing these rituals all of the time, but the lens of how we are looking at it, it might not seem that way. And for me, one of the things that I do sometimes when with some of my clients is getting them to understand how do we make each and every single moment sacred, if that is the word that resonates with them, or to make a ritual out of life, because every single thing that we do matters. And that is not about making everything serious. Like things can be fun, like a ritual can be dancing or singing or whatever it is, but being able to bring this into our everyday life, I think that is so important, because there is such a big gap sometimes in between these worlds, in between the spiritual and the earthly world, whereas it's all one.
Yes.
And I love that, and I love being able to actually bring that together and bridge that gap, because that's how we get into more like normalizing all of these things that somehow they've been lost a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, you bring a good point as well. I love dancing as a form of ritual. I think that people don't realize they're doing that, or even just singing in the shower, because at the end of it, the entry point of your ritual is bringing yourself into the present moment, and that's how we're able to really connect. And that's why we feel so good when we're doing it, because we're able to live wholeheartedly in that exact moment, which we're not doing enough. People aren't living in that present moment. And like you said, everything around you is an invitation for it. So it's just a matter of bringing that awareness and becoming more open to realizing this.
Yes, definitely. And I'm curious, Phoebe, besides your own writing, what's one resource that you would recommend to others, like a book or a podcast or a movie, documentary?
I've got so many.
You can share a couple if you want.
Yes, I know, but I'm going blank, because I find throughout my life I've been pulled to different things. You know, I've had different fascinations, and then I go really deep into one. But I will say one of my most favorite books is Lao Tzu, Tao Teaching. Have you read that?
I haven't. I've read extracts.
Okay. Yes, exactly. But it's a small book. You read it from start to finish, and it's Lao Tzu is actually just means old man in Chinese, so they actually don't know who he was, and it's full of incredible wisdom, more so about consciousness, and just kind of like one of the first extracts is something like, the Tao that cannot be told is not the eternal Tao. So it's saying that we cannot place definitions on what consciousness is, because if we did, then we would be defining what is indefinable. So it's that kind of questioning of what reality is, which I think for me is something that I'm always fascinated in really discovering, you know, who we are, the core seed questions: who am I? I'm grasping information on that. I've got understanding of who that is. I connect with my soul and I really get that. But what is reality is something that's constantly changing. I have a definition of what that is today, but that may change tomorrow. And it's, and as you grow up and as you perceive your life differently, it completely changes. So I really resonate with that book the most. And that's something that, it still never changes. You read it more and you'll understand deeper layers of it.
Beautiful. I might have to, I'm pretty sure that I actually have it here. So I might need to go and get it and get a little bit refreshed with it.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you have to share only one tip for people to get into this space of connection with themselves, which tip would that be?
Oh, I mean, definitely journaling and meditation. But if you're not ready to do that, before you even start with journaling and meditation, you need to get comfortable being by yourself. So I would recommend for you to just really have time on your own, getting to know yourself, preferably in nature if you can. And then you have that journal with you if you feel like you're ready to start writing, or sit beneath a tree and start meditating. But it all starts with getting comfortable with who we really are and learning how to connect with ourselves. So depending on what tool resonates with you the most of how you're going to harness that energy of your soul. But that's where it all begins. We need to become friends with ourselves. We need to love ourselves, and we need to trust our own intuition.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I actually like a lot of times, and this is something that one of my teachers used to say a lot, and I love it, is befriending our experience, befriending ourselves, befriending whatever is happening. And that's so powerful, just like being able to become friends with yourself. Beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
And what is the one thing that you wish that everyone in the world knew? This is a big one.
Yeah, it's a really big one. I feel like maybe connection, that we're all connected, that you're not alone. I think that the loneliness and the self-hatred is the cause of a lot of corruption and evil. And so if we really are able to, remind each other that we're all connected, we're not different from each other, and that there's so much love around us, I think that would really have the benefit to change.
Yes, beautiful. And I do, on top of that, like I want to add that not only we are connected to each other, like I also believe we are connected to everything, regardless if we call that God, the universe, energy, or however we call it. Like we are connected with that, which means we are definitely never alone. And that's something that I always wish that we all learn from since we were kids, so that this wouldn't happen, so that people don't believe that they are alone. So yeah, that's such an important one. And lastly, Phoebe, how can people connect with you and find you online and find some of your writing?
Yes, so I am, everything is at my website, which is phoebegarnsworthy.com. I am most active on social media. Instagram, I'm very active on, and it's lost_nowhere. And I've also just started a YouTube channel, and I'm been posting on that a lot. And I've got free meditations on my YouTube channel. And also I answer a lot of spiritual questions and help share. You can learn how to set up rituals in your own sacred space. I've got a few videos on that too. And my books are available worldwide. So you can get them from your bookshop. You can order them from my website. You can order them from Amazon. You can get them everywhere.
Awesome, cool. And we will put the links on the show notes so that everyone has an easy access to that. But thank you so much, Phoebe, for taking the time to be with us and for everything that you're doing. And for everyone listening, I would love to know if you learned something from this conversation or something resonated with you, or how does this topic relate to your life and what do you incorporate? I'd love to know that. So please leave a comment for for the episode. Once again, Phoebe, thank you so much for taking the time really early morning for you in Portugal at the moment. And I do hope that you have an amazing time when you get back to Australia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Brian. This was great. I really loved talking with you too.
Thank you. And see you everyone on the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.